The armies of the ancient Near East were invariably associated with powerful cavalry. It was on war horses that the might of great empires was built, and cavalry was regarded as the highest achievement of military strategy, while infantry remained in a secondary role. Its role was underestimated, seen only as an auxiliary element. However, in the hard-to-reach mountainous regions of the southern coast of the Caspian Sea, there were tribes that challenged these traditions. The Daylamites were legendary infantrymen of ancient Iran, whose warrior culture was shaped over centuries. These highlanders became famous for their bravery in close combat, strict discipline, and unbreakable spirit. Starting their journey as simple mercenaries, they quickly became a key element of the neighboring empire's army and later became its elite guard. And today we will explore the history of the Daylamites, study their weapons, tactical techniques, the harsh training their warriors went through, and also recall the famous battles that forever inscribed their name in the annals of military history. Let me remind you, you're on the Amazing History channel, the place where forgotten pages of the past come to life. Before we begin, don't forget to support our project by becoming a sponsor on YouTube or Patreon. Your likes, subscriptions, and of course, kind comments are important to us. Now make yourself comfortable, grab some tea, cookies, snacks, and let's get started with the topic of this episode. The lands of ancient Iran have always been famous for their skilled horsemen, who dominated the steppes for centuries and led conquest campaigns. However, not all Iranian peoples followed this equestrian tradition. In the harsh mountainous regions where winding paths, dense forests, and sharp changes in elevation made cavalry almost useless, completely different military traditions developed. One of the most warlike tribes of these lands were the Daylamites, mountain dwellers who lived in the region between the southern coast of the Caspian Sea and the Alborz mountain range. These landscapes were simply perfect for defense. The Alborz range served as a natural barrier, holding back the moist air masses of the Caspian Sea. As a result, its northern slopes were covered with dense forests, swamps, and an interwoven network of rivers, making the area difficult for invaders to access. In ancient times, bears, wolves, and large ungulates lived here, providing the Daylamites with wealth. Hunting contributed to the development of physical strength and military skills. Archaeological findings show that people inhabited this region as far back as the early Paleolithic era. Its first inhabitants were nomads, hunters, and herders. However, the harsh living conditions hardened them in battle. Over time, the tribes formed warlike communities where power belonged to local chiefs or kings. These rulers fiercely guarded the independence of their people, preferring death to submission. Because of their remoteness from major civilizations, the Daylamites and their neighbors were often seen as savages and barbarians, without realizing that they possessed a unique military culture. However, the great empires could not ignore this region. As early as the 8th century BC, the Median Kingdom encountered the tribes of the southern Caspian when it began to expand its borders. Although there are few historical sources about this conflict, it can be assumed that the struggle was fierce, since even centuries later, Persian kings had difficulty establishing control over these lands. The Daylamites repeatedly became a headache for Achaemenid, Parthian, and Sasanian rulers, but later they would become indispensable warriors in the armies of great empires. The story of these steadfast warriors is only just beginning. In the 6th century BC, the lands of Daylam were conquered and incorporated into the Achaemenid Empire. However, the subjugation of these harsh highlanders turned out to be more of a formality. No conquerors could fully control the hard-to-reach regions of Alborz. Instead of suppressing the Daylamites, the Persians found another use for them. They became part of the empire's fighting forces. This is evidenced by Herodotus, who mentions that warriors from northern Iran were part of the army during the invasion of Greece in 480 BC. They may have participated in the Battle of Thermopylae and in other clashes of the Greco-Persian Wars. Later, their descendants fought in the ranks of Darius III's army, trying to stop Alexander the Great at the Battle of Gaugamela. However, even their courage could not change the outcome of the battle. In the following centuries, empires came and went, but the situation for the Daylamites remained unchanged. The mountain peoples were nominally part of the Parthian kingdom, but remained independent. The Parthians, renowned for their heavy cavalry, the cataphracts, did not pay much attention to infantry troops, and therefore were unable to fully utilize the potential of these resilient warriors. However, the situation changed dramatically with the arrival of the Sasanians in the 3rd century AD. Unlike the Parthians, they realized the need for a more balanced army. In addition to shock cavalry, Sasanian tactics began to include strong infantry units. In search of elite warriors capable of enduring long and tough battles, the rulers turned their attention to the Daylamites. The homeland of the Daylamites was Daylam, a mountainous region in what is now Iran's Gilan province. It was a harsh land. Poor soil, dense forests, and difficult terrain forced the local people to live a hard life. They harvested timber, fished, and raised livestock, but none of these activities could provide them with a prosperous life. The proud and independent spirit of the Daylamites was evident even in their rulers. One of the Persian chronicles tells a story of how an envoy who arrived in these lands was surprised to see the local king, barefoot, working in the field, dressed in a tattered tunic. This symbolized the unique way of life of the Daylamites. They despised luxury and were hardened by hard labor. Such harsh conditions made the Daylamites strong, resilient, and unyielding in battle. Their military skills were highly valued, and so they were readily hired into the armies of larger powers. The Sassanids began to use them as elite heavy infantry, capable of withstanding cavalry charges and storming fortifications. Later, their military traditions were continued by the Fatimids, whose armies also included Daylamite units. Over time, these once wild highlanders became one of the most formidable fighting forces in the Middle East, infantrymen capable of fighting on equal terms even with Roman legionaries. What kind of equipment did these warriors have? At the dawn of their military history, the Daylamites fought as light infantry, relying on speed and maneuverability. They did not wear heavy armor and mainly used spears, axes, and bows. However, over time, as their role in the Sassanid armies increased, their equipment became more impressive. Now, based on historical sources, let's reconstruct their appearance in the 6th and 7th centuries AD, when they became the elite heavy infantry of the empire. The basic clothing of the Daylamites included boots and trousers suitable for moving in mountainous terrain, a shirt or a quilted vest that provided additional protection, chainmail or lamellar armor fastened with decorated belts and chest straps. To protect their heads, the Daylamites used helmets in the Spangenhelm style. These are sturdy metal helmets assembled from several plates and reinforced with bands. Some helmets were supplemented with cheek guards and aventails that protected the face and neck. In addition, warriors wore Sassanid battle ribbons, which not only decorated their armor, but also indicated their status. For protection, the Daylamites used large round or oval shields decorated with bright colors and distinctive patterns. Judging by the surviving images, such shields could be reinforced with metal elements and embossed designs. The best warriors often inlaid their weapons with gold details and insignia, emphasizing their elite status. The arsenal of the Daylamites was diverse. It allowed them to operate effectively both in close and long-range combat. The Zupin is a short spear with blades on both ends. It was used as a throwing weapon or as a stabbing weapon in close combat. Tabazin is a Persian battle axe with 1 or 2 crescent-shaped blades. Its metal handle provided strength, and the shape of the blade made it easy to pierce even heavy armor. Its length was usually 90 centimeters, but there were versions up to 2 meters. The Daylamites widely used Persian swords, which were attached to the belt with a suspension system similar to the one used by horsemen. This made it convenient to carry weapons and quickly draw them in battle. Bows and slings, as long-range weapons, allowed the Daylamites to weaken the enemy before close combat. The Daylamites were among the most dangerous warriors of their time. Their endurance, skill in close combat, and discipline made them indispensable in the armies of great powers. This was especially true for the personal guard of the kings, known as Gund-i Shahanshah.
Армия царя царей.
These elite fighters received the best weapons, crafted by the top masters of the Sasanian Empire, whose blacksmiths could rival Indian and Chinese ones in steel quality. How were these warriors organized and trained? Like their weapons, the structure of the Daylamites changed over time. Initially, they were fierce but poorly organized fighters, similar to Celtic and Germanic barbarians. However, after being incorporated into the Sasanian army and becoming familiar with the methods of large-scale battles, their tactics and discipline changed. The Sasanians did not just use them as mercenaries. The Daylamites became an important part of the regular troops. They studied strategy, tactics, and the formation of battle lines, adopting the best traditions of the imperial army. By the 7th century, they had become an organized military force capable of standing against the best armies of their time. The exact organization of the Daylamites in the Sasanian army remains a subject of debate among historians. However, some key points can be highlighted. The main commander of all the infantry was probably the pagan Salar, the second most important person in the army after the Savaran Sardar, who led the cavalry. The infantry units of the Sasanian Empire were divided into several categories: Komandaran archers, who provided combat and long-range support, Nezadaran spearmen, who performed the tasks of light infantry, and Paigan, the heavily armed infantry who formed the backbone of the army. It is believed that by the 6th century AD, the Daylamites had taken key positions among the heavy infantry and eventually replaced the previous units. They became the core of the elite infantry units, which testifies to their high combat effectiveness. Although there is no exact information about the internal organization of the Daylamite units, it can be assumed that they had a clear military hierarchy. It was probably similar to the structures of other armies of that time, where the system of tens, hundreds, and thousands was used. Initially, the Daylamites operated in small tribal units, where the chief would lead his warriors into battle. However, the Sasanian military system required strict discipline and coordination, so they adopted a tactical organization more suitable for the army of a major power. Thus, a Daylamite unit could be divided into combat groups with commanders assigned at different levels. Their courage and resilience allowed them to fight against superior enemy forces, which was especially evident in the later Sasanian wars against Byzantium and the Arabs. The Daylamites were not just warriors, they represented a professional military caste that underwent rigorous training. Although the exact methods of their training remain unknown, some sources indicate that they could be included in official state registers and receive salaries, similar to elite cavalry units. It is believed that their training included elements of Persian military tradition, including the Zurkane system, an ancient martial art that developed strength, discipline, endurance, and moral resilience. The possible training of the Daylamites could have included wrestling and hand-to-hand combat, intensive physical exercises, as well as working with traditional heavy equipment such as kettlebells and clubs, which resemble modern athletic hammers. Hardened by the harsh mountain conditions, the Daylamites were distinguished by incredible endurance. Their training made them not only strong, but also psychologically resilient, which allowed them to fight to the last and not retreat even in the face of superior enemy forces. Thus, from scattered groups of mountaineers, they turned into a disciplined elite infantry, capable of fighting on equal terms with Roman legions, Arab armies, and the best cavalry forces of the East. As I mentioned before, in the Sasanian army, the Daylamites played a key role as part of the heavy infantry. Some sources indicate that the pagan included both heavily armed warriors and more mobile units. In the early stages, they could be positioned behind the archers, protecting them from sudden attacks. When the enemy ranks were weakened by a hail of arrows, the Daylamites would enter the battle, finishing off the battered opponent. Later, the pagan became the main heavy infantry corps, holding the center of the battle formation. In this role, the Daylamites took the main blow, while the cavalry used flanking maneuvers to get behind enemy lines. However, their role was not limited to static defense. Sasanian commanders also used them more dynamically. One of their favorite tactics was a feigned cavalry attack. The cavalry units would rush forward, creating the threat of a swift strike. The enemy would concentrate their forces to repel this attack, but then the cavalry would suddenly split to the sides. At that moment, the Daylamites would deliver a powerful frontal strike, breaking through the weakened center of the enemy. This maneuver constantly kept the enemy on edge and could be used in different directions on the battlefield, causing a devastating effect. In addition to participating in combined arms battles, the Daylamites carried out a wide range of tasks that required high combat training and endurance. They accompanied the war elephants of the Sasanian army and protected them from enemy attacks, preventing encirclement and panic. They were used as shock assault troops and were even involved in special operations, especially during sieges. For example, in the Battle of Dura Europos, they could infiltrate the fortress through tunnels, launching a sudden sortie. Over time, their status in the army continued to grow. The best of the best were selected for the personal guard of the Shahanshah, turning them into elite units responsible for the security of the ruler of the Sasanian Empire. Now let's talk about the most significant conflicts in which the Daylamites participated. Their integration into the Sasanian army was gradual. It probably received a significant boost around the year 520, when the eldest son of Shakavad I was appointed as the ruler of their lands. This led to a strengthening of the ties between the Highlanders and the central authority, as well as an expansion of their role in the military conflicts of the Sasanian state. Soon a war broke out between Sasanian Iran and Byzantium. The main battles were fought in northern Mesopotamia and Armenia, where the fortresses and mountainous terrain made the area ideal for experienced close-quarters fighters. The Daylamites took an active part in the Iberian campaign, which aimed to regain control over the Caucasus. In the following decades, they were repeatedly sent to key sections of the front. Their role was especially significant in the Lazic War during the reign of Khosrow the Fierce Anushirvan. The Byzantine historian Procopius of Caesarea noted the bravery and skill of the Daylamites, especially during the siege of Ariapolis in 552. Their combat skills in the mountains made them an indispensable force in the Caucasian conflicts, where the Byzantines were forced to acknowledge their superiority in close combat. In 570, several hundred Daylamites joined the Sassanid Expeditionary Corps that was sent to Yemen by sea. The formal objective of the mission was to protect the Himyarites from the growing influence of the Kingdom of Aksum. However, in reality, the Sassanids sought to establish control over the trade routes. The expedition was led by Vahriz, a Sassanid general of Daylamite origin. During the campaign, his son Navzad fell in battle. Driven by revenge, Vahriz defeated the Aksumites in the Battle of Hadramaut. He killed their king and besieged Sana'a. Although the Sassanids soon withdrew their army, in 575 the Aksumites captured Yemen again. This time, Varus brought 4,000 warriors and for several years conducted a campaign involving raids, sieges, and field battles. Ultimately, he established Sassanid rule in the region, becoming the first Persian governor of Yemen. Many of his warriors and descendants remained in Arabia, which contributed to the spread of Daylamite influence over Arab lands. Meanwhile, the wars with Byzantium continued, and the Sassanids used Daylamite troops in campaigns against Justin II, especially in the mountainous regions of the Caucasus and the fortresses of northern Mesopotamia. The author Agathias of Myrina noted that Roman infantrymen could not match the Daylamites in close combat. However, the year 1589 became a turning point. The two-year civil war led to the uprising of Bahram Chubin, and the Daylamites supported him against Khosrow II. However, after Chubin's defeat, their reputation did not suffer. On the contrary, the Shahanshah accepted the Daylamites into his personal guard, which shows their military value even after taking part in the rebellion. Around the year 1600, Khosrow II relocated 4,000 elite Daylamites closer to the capital Ctesiphon and provided them with better equipment and training. They were given the title Army of the King of Kings, which made them a privileged military force. However, their service coincided with the decline of the Sassanid Empire, when Arab conquerors began their expansion. In 636, the army of the Rashidun Caliphate advanced against the weakened Sassanid Empire. The young ruler, who was only 12 years old, found himself at the head of a state exhausted by endless wars. The decisive Battle of Al-Qadisiyah became a turning point. About 40,000 Sassanid warriors took part in the clash, including Daylamites, who fought among war elephants, cavalry, and infantry. In the fierce battle that lasted several days, the Arab forces claimed victory, which sealed the Sassanid Empire's fall. Arab sources claim that after the defeat, some of the Daylamites switched sides to join the caliphate. However, their homeland, the mountainous Daylam, continued to resist the Arab invasion for several centuries. Despite the collapse of the Sassanid state, the Daylamites did not disappear from the political and military scene. They began to offer their services as mercenaries, and by the 10th century, Daylamite infantry had become an important part of the caliphate's army. As in the Sassanid era, they gained the status of elite warriors and became the personal guard of great rulers. Their resilience, discipline, and combat skills secured them a key role in Muslim armies, especially in the forces of the Buyids, who ruled a significant part of Persia and Iraq. Today, the descendants of the Daylamites are considered to be the Gilaks, Mazandaranis, and Talish, peoples inhabiting the northern provinces of Iran and the southern regions of Azerbaijan. These peoples still preserve their ancestors' cultural and linguistic heritage. Their languages belong to the Caspian group of Iranian languages, and despite the influence of Persian, have preserved ancient features. The historical military heritage of the Daylamites is also evident in the fact that the inhabitants of these regions often became warriors and military leaders in various eras, especially during the Buyid and Safavid periods. The Talish people, living along the southwestern coast of the Caspian Sea, also preserved martial traditions and for centuries participated in the struggle against invaders. Thus, the legacy of the Daylamites lives on not only in history, but also in their descendants, whose roots go back to the rugged mountain lands of northern Iran and the South Caucasus. Their unique role in military history should not be forgotten, as they became an example of resilience, military skill, and independence. That's all from me. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye!